The house stood silent and alone on the hill, its dark windows staring out at the world below. It had been empty for years, ever since the tragic accident that had claimed the lives of its former owners, the Miller family. One day, a young couple named Sarah and John decided to rent the house for a weekend getaway. They had heard stories about its haunted past, but they didn't believe them. They thought it would be fun to spend a night in a haunted house. They arrived at the house late on Friday night. It was even more imposing in person than it had been in the pictures. Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine as they pulled up in the driveway. "Are you sure about this?" she asked John. "Of course," he said. "It'll be fun." They carried their bags into the house and turned on the lights. The interior was just as gloomy as the exterior. The furniture was covered in dust sheets, and the air was thick with the smell of mildew. "It's a little creepy," Sarah said. "Just a little," John agreed, "but it's also kind of cool." They decided to explore the house before going to bed. They found a living room, a dining room, a kitchen, and 4 bedrooms. The master bedroom was the largest and most impressive, with a king-size bed and a large walk-in closet. "This is where we'll stay," John said. Sarah nodded. She was starting to feel more comfortable in the house. It was just a little old and dusty, that was all. They went to bed early that night. Sarah was tired from the drive, and she fell asleep quickly. John stayed up a little later, watching TV. At around midnight, John heard a noise downstairs. He got out of bed and went to investigate. He found the kitchen door open and a light on inside. He cautiously entered the kitchen. There was no one there, but the back door was open. He went to the door and looked out. The backyard was dark and empty. John closed the door and went back to bed. He figured he must have imagined the noise. The next morning, Sarah and John woke up refreshed. They made breakfast and then went for a walk in the woods behind the house. They were having a great time until they came across a strange sight. There was a small clearing in the woods, and in the middle of the clearing was a large hole in the ground. Sarah and John went over to the hole and looked down. It was deep and dark. They couldn't see the bottom. "What is this?" Sarah asked. "I don't know," John said. "But it looks dangerous. We should be careful." They decided to go back to the house. As they were walking away, Sarah heard a noise behind her. She turned around and saw something move in the bushes. "What was that?" she asked. "I don't know," John said. "Probably just a squirrel." But Sarah wasn't so sure. She had a feeling that they were being watched. That night, Sarah and John decided to go to bed early again. They were both tired from their walk in the woods. But Sarah couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the hole in the ground and the noise she had heard in the bushes. She had a feeling that something bad was going to happen. At around midnight, Sarah heard a noise outside her bedroom door. She got out of bed and went to the door. She peered out through the crack in the door, but she couldn't see anything. She opened the door a little wider and peered out again. This time, she saw something. There was a figure standing in the hallway. It was too dark to see who it was, but Sarah could tell that it was a man. The man turned his head and looked at Sarah. His eyes were glowing red in the darkness. Sarah screamed and slammed the door shut. She locked the door and then ran to the window. She looked out the window, but the man was gone. Sarah ran back to bed and woke John up. She told him what had happened. "It was probably just a dream," John said. "No, it was real," Sarah said. "I saw him." John didn't believe her, but he got out of bed and checked the hallway. There was no one there. "See," he said, "it was just a dream." But Sarah knew what she had seen. The man was real. Sarah couldn't sleep after she saw the man in the hallway. She lay in bed, listening to every sound. She kept expecting the man to come back, but he didn't. Finally, she fell asleep, but her sleep was restless. She had nightmares about the man and the hole in the ground. She woke up early the next morning, exhausted. John was still asleep. She got out of bed and went to the kitchen to make breakfast. As she was making breakfast, she heard a noise in the backyard. She went to the window and looked out. The man was standing in the backyard. He was staring at her. Sarah screamed and dropped the plate of eggs she was holding. She ran to the living room and woke John up. "The man is back," she said. "What man?" John asked. "The man I saw last night," Sarah said. "He's in the backyard." John went to the window and looked out. The man was gone. "I don't see anyone," he said. "He was just there," Sarah said. "I saw him." John didn't believe her, but he agreed to go outside and check. He searched the backyard, but he couldn't find the man. "He must have been your imagination," he said. Sarah knew that she wasn't imagining things. The man was real. They decided to leave the house, but when they went to the front door, they found that it was locked. They tried all the other doors, but they were all locked. They were trapped in the house with the man. Sarah and John spent the rest of the day trying to find a way out of the house, but they couldn't. They were starting to lose hope. That night, the man came back. He stood outside Sarah's bedroom door and stared at her through the crack in the door. Sarah screamed and pulled the covers over her head. John heard Sarah scream and came running into the room. He turned on the light, but the man was gone. "Are you okay?" John asked. Sarah nodded, but she was shaking. She knew that the man was still out there. They spent the rest of the night awake, huddled together in bed. They were too afraid to sleep. The next morning, Sarah and John were exhausted. They were starting to lose hope. They knew that they couldn't stay in the house any longer. They decided to try to escape through the hole in the ground. They went to the clearing in the woods and found the hole. They tied a rope around John's waist and lowered him down the hole. John reached the bottom of the hole and found himself in a dark tunnel. He could see a light at the end of the tunnel. He followed the light and soon found himself outside. He untied the rope and waved it to Sarah. Sarah tied the rope around her waist and John pulled her up. Sarah and John were finally free. They ran back to their car and drove away. They never looked back. But the silent house remained, standing alone on the hill, its dark windows staring out at the world below. and inside the house the man waited,